Hello and welcome to this episode of Automation of Evidence Synthesis and Systematic Reviews. This is one of the two series that we started to document the methodological and technological developments in our field in conversation with the science and tech leaders. We are documenting the past, present, and futures for all generations of evidence synthesizers or systematic reviewers. My guest today is no one but Artur Nowak, and you may know that he is the co-founder of Evidence Prime, and Evidence Prime has got two major products. One of them is GRADEpro GDT, and the other one, Laser AI. Artur, hello and welcome to this episode, and thank you very much for agreeing for this interview. Please tell us your story. In particular, we are interested to know who you were before 2014 and why your blog has not been updated for 15 years.
That's a great question. Hello, and thank you for having me. Before 2014, before we founded Evidence Prime, I had a career in software engineering, and this meant that I kind of looked at myself as going through, let's say, different levels of seniority in just developing software in general. I worked in software for tax offices, for instance, for Ministry of Finance here in Poland, but also I had quite, I think, interesting time developing software for managing art collections. So that was also a very nice domain to learn and work in, especially, all the great people, very passionate about their work. But my interest really since my university years was in natural language processing and how computers can help in research, because I believe that many members of the audience will agree that, as researchers, we kind of have this ideal that research really makes the world better, right? That we can achieve progress that is equitable and that is actually reducing poverty and eradicating diseases through research. And for this reason, I was always interested in how we can actually manage sorting through vast piles of papers. This in computer science is called information retrieval. I didn't know about systematic reviews at that time, but for instance, for my master thesis, I created a vertical search engine that was designed to be a better Google Scholar. So I was, learning how to build a software like this, and I did some of the stuff that is actually currently now done on the production level. Like, for instance, how to automatically expand the query from the user based on ontologies. So, of course, like with many research projects, it was not taking into consideration all the difficulties of making this a product, of going into production with this. And all this stuff I learned through my years as a software developer. So in 2014, when this opportunity arrived to actually do both, I mean, do software engineering, but also be on the forefront of research and do research in information retrieval, I, of course, jumped at this opportunity because it was really the dream come true. And the very beginnings of Evidence Prime as a company is that we are a spin-off of McMaster University. And we were initially tasked to develop new version of GRADEpro. So GRADEpro, as some of you may know, was a Windows application at some point. But this was not really the first version of GRADEpro. There was also an Excel spreadsheet that was developed by Holger Schienemann and colleagues as some sort of a first automated tool for for creation of evidence tables. Then there was a desktop application for Windows. And at some point, this tool became outdated, and the team at McMaster was looking for somebody to create like a new generation of this tool. And this is really how Evidence Prime was born.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I mean, I think you are the first one I'm meeting that has been into tax office and finance, art, and then healthcare. Um, it's very complex because usually I find it difficult that someone could be interested in all three of them. And then the pathway that you've chosen, the right one actually, leaving tax office behind and art. I'm sure that there are a lot of things that you may have learned from those experiences that now we are benefiting from. And then you mentioned your interest in natural language processing and information retrieval. And I always tell people that the entire systematic review is search or information retrieval. I mean, we start with the search and then we screen, which is a type of search again. And then in the full text, we look for the data, which is again the searching for the data. So it is a completely relevant background that you brought in. And it was the right timing as well. 2014 was the time that Cochrane started, I think, or tried to improve reporting of grade in the Cochrane reviews, and we all needed that. So it's great that you chose to come this way, not any other way that makes more money, obviously, but also to serve the patients and save many lives. So is Evidence Prime started after you had GRADEpro, and then Laser AI is the newest addition to the collection.
Yes, yes, this is true. So especially if we count this desktop application and this spreadsheet that I mentioned before as really the first versions of GRADEpro. So we created the new web-based application, which was of course really groundbreaking at that time. I mean, in technology, 10 years is really an eternity. So but at that time, web applications were really starting out, and what we now have as some sort of a standard. I mean that you actually have something that lives in your browser and does very complex things. In 2014, it was still a little bit about just pages where you send something to the server and you get a report back, but it's not like we are actually working within your browser. Something that now is pretty natural, and especially with GRADEpro, we started with a very specific requirement that the tool needs to be working offline. So and it was not really so easy from the technology perspective how to do a web application that needs to work in real time. I mean that people can collaborate through this web application, but at the same time that it can also work offline. And the reason that it needs to work offline is that GRADEpro is used pretty much on every continent, maybe except for one, but it's used a lot in countries with let's say intermittent problems with internet connection and maybe
Absolutely.
electricity. So we actually have users from Africa that don't have internet all the time. And for this reason, they simply cannot use a tool that always requires a server connection. So this was an interesting challenge from the, let's say, technology perspective, but also something that set our sight at really the mission here. That it's not really yet another product, but something with, let's say, a greater aim, and that we need to think ahead about some things that are not first world problems, but we need to think globally.
Yes, absolutely. And how about Laser AI?
Yeah, so later AI, even if it's the newest one, the work actually dates back to 2018. So
Oh,
again, before the ChatGPT era. And the development of the product started really in 2019, but in 2018 we took part in a machine learning competition, so AI competition in today's
Where
terms.
was it? Where was that?
So this was organized by NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technology in the US, with NIH and US Environmental Protection Agency, and they were looking into something that was really, trying to establish the state of the art for data extraction. So I believe that, even today, data extraction, especially on the complex hierarchical level, is not solved yet. And in 2018, it was kind of looked at as some sort of, moonshot problem, really, that we are very far ahead from solving data extraction. And especially in toxicology, in environmental science, they actually have a lot of data. I mean, if we look at this from the kind of clinical background, if they have like 100 studies to extract from, they call it a data poor project, a data poor review, which is kind of unbelievable, if you think about this from, the reviews that, for instance, Cochrane does, right? But the number of studies, animal studies, in vitro studies, is so great that they really need to extract a lot of data, especially when you factor the fact that you are actually looking at classes of chemicals. So the group that we are working with, for instance, does research on bisphenol A, the impact of bisphenol A on endocrine system was based also on their work. It's not really one chemical, it's whole class of chemicals, and you have so many studies that makes this data extraction really time consuming. They very often have like hundreds of studies to extract from. And this is the reason why they put effort into creating a data set, and they launched this competition with teams from all around the world trying to build models that will really crack the extraction problem. So we submitted our solution in September 2018, and I remember this very clearly because in October the BERT paper came out, and BERT is basically the first language model based on the transformer architecture. So our solution at that time was very modern because it was using ELMo, and you probably see this Sesame Street analogy here. ELMo was first model that was not based on transformers. It was based on LSTM network, which is actually having its comeback now a little bit with new types of models that we see. But ELMo was then kind of superseded by BERT. And of course, there were also other models based on characters from the Sesame Street, but BERT was some sort of introduction of the transformer architecture into, let's say, wider use. Of course, the transformer is the architecture that is used by ChatGPT, the GPT models, was created in 2017, actually, with the Attention is All You Need paper. But it took some time from going from the definition of the architecture to the language modeling and kind of bringing these two pieces together. So we actually won this competition back then in 2018, and this triggered this whole laser work. But also the fact that we started before GPT, let's say, took over the world, it meant that we also had a slightly more experience and a different approach. So just to give you one example, the first models were doing something called sequence labeling. So it was not a generative model. It was not generating text based on your prompt. These models were built, and they are still in use actually, to tell you whether a given word is part of, let's say, intervention or population. So it was kind of assigning labels to every token or every word in the text. And for this reason, the user interface that we built around this in Laser, and we actually started with data extraction, which may be a little bit unusual, was built with this idea that you highlight stuff in the text from day one. Because, this is how we build the models, and this is how also the task was specified by the users. So, when generative AI appeared, everybody started building chats, and that you can throw in a PDF and ask a question, and then you just get the answer, and you don't really know where this answer comes from. But we could already leverage what we built. I mean, this whole platform for highlighting stuff in PDFs, and this approach that we start with the highlights. So I believe that this also, this kind of early start gave us a unique perspective on how to approach this problem.
Very interesting. So it was well, the news that we were hearing about laser AI has been in the recent couple of years. So I actually had no idea that the idea started in 2018 and then developed into the first version, let's say, in 2019. And what was the problem? I mean, I find it interesting that you dived into data extraction, because whomever start with the automation, they usually go for the search and the screening. Data extraction looks like too big of a bait to swallow. And that's why I think many people consider going for, if they are developing a new program, focus on the screening. But what is the problem with data extraction that makes it difficult and makes it time consuming, even for the automation developers and innovators?
So you said at one point that everything is search, right? So and I agree, but at the same time, I also have this saying that everything is extraction. Because if you think really about screening, and if you even look at the abstract level, you're kind of implicitly extracting, for instance, the study type from this abstract and comparing this extracted study type to your inclusion criteria. So I believe that extraction is really a necessary step or component of every stage of literature review. And of course, it may be kind of induced by our experience and kind of starting with extraction. And of course, the fact that we started with extraction is kind of also based on how this all played out, that we took part in this extraction competition, then we got some contracts to work on this, and so the need there was to build an app for extraction, because simply it was an unsolved problem. At the same time, screening, when you kind of look at this from the perspective of the market, let's say, or the groups that can choose any tool, they didn't feel that screening is in need of a new tool, right? So of course, every platform wants to kind of do something, everything from end to end, but from the perspective of groups that are actually kind of solving their problems, extraction was a problem. And you asked why it's difficult, and I believe that there are really two things here. So the first thing, and I believe that this is really part of a larger problem, is that we, as the community, we don't really have very good ways of defining different fields in extraction. So in other words, annotation guidelines. And this is pretty evident every time you look at any data sets that get published, or if you look at the kind of always returning topic of reusing data. So, why people re-extract data from the same papers. But at the same time, I know about many groups that even if they have the data they extracted, they don't reuse this for next projects because the definition of the extraction form changes, or the focus is different. So the first thing is that the problem is not really well specified in many areas. For screening, we, for instance, have the different, let's say, mnemonics, but of course, PICOs is the most popular one. So we have some structure, even if it's still, I think, a little bit under specified in many cases. But for extraction, very often it's difficult for people to actually agree on what should go into different fields and what is, let's say, the standard form. And this makes the automation difficult because for the automation, you actually need to know what to automate. And now if every group does it a little bit differently, then it's difficult to train these models, right? Because once we train the model, they act in a way they were trained. So, and the second problem is that in extraction, you very often have like a series of tasks. It's not like just one number at the end, but you, for instance, need to identify study arms before you can extract values, let's say, for instance, effect estimates for different outcomes across the study arms. So if you make a mistake when detecting the outcomes or study arms, these errors kind of propagate, and it's not like a sum of errors, it's multiplication, right? So if I don't get study arms correctly, perhaps half of the stuff I do when extracting data for the values is already incorrect because I did it for study arms that don't exist. So perhaps the kind of risk of doing this also incorrectly is very high. So yeah, I believe that these are really the two problems here.
Thank you. I didn't know that part. That it's about the multiple tasks as well, not just a single task. And just before diving into GRADEpro, I want to, because Laser AI is newer, I think the audience might want to know more about it. So what are the facilities, automation features, and AI, large language models or RAG, that you are currently using in Laser AI? And is it just about data extraction, or we could do screening, meta-analysis, or something more than just data extraction in Laser AI?
Yeah, so we started with extraction, then we added screening and also full text screening, where we also try to add automation. Actually, automation in full text screening, I think, is an area where I'm personally not aware of many studies. I mean, people kind of trying to attack this problem. We did one last year, and we presented the results at the Global Evidence Summit. There was a poster from our group, and hopefully there will be also a paper shortly. So we are also adding automation to full text screening. Linking back to what I said, that everything looks like extraction. So, maybe this is the problem, that if you have a golden hammer, everything look like a nail. But but we are actually treating this full text screening automation a little bit like extraction. Exactly, right? So if, for instance, the inclusion criteria say that you want only to include studies with at least 10 patients, then we just extract the number of patients and we compare this to the number that you have in your inclusion criteria. So so this is, I think, also a very, very interesting and a new area for us. Title and abstract screening, we do the, let's say, typical automation, generating ranking based on your decisions. But my personal take is that we are kind of hitting the wall with this approach. I can explain in more detail why I think that this ranking approach is not really going to improve a lot. I mean, we tried for years, and maybe that's one of the reasons why I'm so convinced. But I can also give you better, let's say, reasons that we just didn't manage to do this. So now with screening, title and abstract screening, we are also using the hammer, right? So we are also doing extraction now with the new models, the so-called small language models. So the models that, of course, by standards of what we started with. I mean, when I started describing our very beginnings with in 2018. We had models with around 300 million parameters. Nowadays, we say that the model is small if it's around 1 billion parameters. But by today's standards, given all the advancement and also faster computers, these are small language models. And what is happening? I mean, the 2024 was really the year of efficiency. I mean, we of course had like the new types of models like O1, O3 from OpenAI, and now many new ones from other labs like DeepSeek R1 and Skylab T1 today, and it's really kind of happening every single day. By the way, by the time you post this video, I believe many of what we talk about today will be already outdated. But the reality is that we haven't moved so much in terms of the efficiency, or let's say accuracy of the base models, but we got much more efficient over the last year. And this means that we can actually now do some data extraction on the abstract level, and it's still working fast enough, right? So the next frontier is really to do this on this search level. So the idea is that we can do search in PubMed and then kind of pre-screen this for you, do things like study design extraction, so kind of tagging all the search results. And because we have these small models that are quite good, it's kind of becoming feasible. We are kind of trying to cover everything. Also, now thinking about doing meta-analysis, but we are actually not going to build our own tools. Here we are, for many years integrated with Cochrane's RevMan and other tools. So I believe that this is where the actual meta-analysis will happen. But what we are doing is embedding these notebooks, data science notebooks within the platform, so we can actually run your R code on live data. So instead of kind of exporting data from Laser, importing this into R, and then do some analysis, you can run your R code directly in the platform, and this way have a real living review. Because you can kind of see how the data changes. Of course, here the caveat is, of course, that for living reviews, you need to have special statistical methods that you can actually, run many times without the risk of overestimating the results. So all the usual caveat apply of kind of fitting the same statistical model many times to the same data. But I believe that our users are kind of aware of all these risks, and they will use this responsibly.
Very exciting, very exciting. Two things. Are you using RAG in Laser AI? And we need to discuss why you think that we hit the wall on using the ranking in this screening. I mean, I have some ideas, but I want to hear from you.
Yeah, so we use RAG. Actually, before it was called RAG, I believe, because what is maybe a little bit unintuitive is with these new models, we get more and more of the so-called context length, right? So the models can consume more input. So it may appear that right now you can just throw the whole PDF. So if you are doing extraction, let's just, concatenate all the PDFs that you have for one study and just ask questions for all of them at the same time, because they will fit into context. But there are, two things here. So the first one is, of course, let's say, are the costs associated with putting more input than necessary. And I think that this is also one of the differences in our approach to what you can sometimes find in published research, that we actually need to make this tool kind of cost efficient. I mean that we actually need to make sure that the unit economics work, and that people are not spending like hundreds of dollars per review in API costs. When you do like a one-off study on OpenAI or one or something like this doesn't really matter to you, because you just want to show what is the result. But of course, when you build a platform and you have like hundreds of these PDFs processed every hour, then it's a different story. So we of course need to be pretty smart about how to spend the credits to make really the tool in the end available to the users, right? Because if we kind of make this too expensive, then people then will not use it. But the second thing is that if you put a lot of this context, even if you can, the model will actually not kind of use all of this text, let's say, efficiently. And there is, for instance, a very simple benchmark that you can ask the model to retrieve something, and then put this paragraph together with a lot of other text. And now you can kind of move this paragraph that contains the answer. You can put this at the beginning of the context, at the end of the context, in the middle. So because the models are trained on our let's say work, and we are kind of we are taught to write our pieces in such a way that you have introduction and conclusion and all the arguments in the middle. Then the model actually learn to only look at the beginning and at the end, and they kind of de-emphasize everything that comes in the middle. So for this reason, it's not like every word in this context will matters with the same wave. And for this reason, it's better to do this retrieval-augmented generation, so to actually retrieve something from the paper. So even if you have one paper, it still makes sense to fetch some snippets from this paper and only send this to the model. This is really the meaning of this RAG in the context of having just one document. Because of course, typically when people talk about RAG, they are dealing with collections of documents, and this retrieval happens across vast number of documents. But even with a single document, it still helps a lot. In terms of what kind of language models we use, we are actually using everything that comes out. It's changing so quickly. I mean, at the beginning of 2024, there was really OpenAI and nobody could match their level. Now it's completely different story, right? So it kind of turned like 180 degrees within 1 year. So we just need to be prepared to leverage everything that comes out of this research, and not actually to attach ourselves to one model. But also something that is becoming more and more important to us is to have like a full understanding and transparency in how these models were trained and what we use. And this is, I think, becoming more and more important for our users, many of them from the government sector, because there are some controversies around, for instance, the OpenAI models. I mean, we know that they were trained on some data that is copyrighted, and of course they are striking some deals with the copyright owners for the data, but at the same time we are never sure that actually all this data was cleared for copyright. And the reality is that even in US and in Europe even more, if you have a model that was trained on something that, with violation of copyright, then you cannot use this model for commercial reasons or commercial applications. So this is some sort of a Pandora's box nowadays, but nobody's really opening this box for obvious reasons, because otherwise, we could potentially be banned from using OpenAI models for work, right? And that would be, and this is actually the case in many institutions. And I believe that it may become more and more a problem over this year as people are kind of, becoming more aware of the legal consequences. So for this reason, we are also kind of building this alternative, let's say, set of models where we don't have this problem. Even if maybe the, let's say, accuracy is lower, but we have like full clarity that, it was trained only using, let's say, legally obtained data. And should I move to the ranking question, or do you have
Yes,
any?
please. Yes,
Yeah,
please. I wanted to bring it up. Yes.
yeah. So so with ranking, I believe that the most important problem here is how much signal we lose if we just look at yes or no decision. And typically these ranking models are just trained on whether something was included or not. But very often you may have a study that kind of checks all the boxes, but maybe there is just one thing about this abstract that makes this excluded. But on the other hand, you have some abstracts that you kind of exclude right away because it's completely irrelevant, right? So I believe that if we are only training these ranking models on such weak signal, then it's a little bit like trying to teach somebody how to recycle by just seeing them see that this is something that we don't recycle and everything else is recycled, but I will not tell you what's the rule and which container I will put it in, right? So I think this is really the problem, that from the model perspective, it's not actually clear why something gets excluded, because it's so close to the other included papers. So one approach would be, and we have something like this in Laser, to let people actually choose the exclusion reason on the abstract level. And even if it's not mandatory, I believe that many groups are already doing this, especially if you have good screening instructions that make it easy to choose the reason. And if you have a good user interface that allows you to progress quickly with something like this. But at this point, actually, we are already going into this extraction stuff, right? Because if I'm now saying that this abstract will get excluded because it is it's not the right study type, then it means basically that I extracted the study type and now I say that this is not the correct one. So for this reason, we believe that the path forward is actually defining the inclusion criteria in a very specific way. And by the way, this is what I believe is really the main challenge to solve the automation. I mean, to make better protocols. I mean, only with really good protocols we can automate reviews. So my saying is that we can automate reviews if they are systematic, and they are systematic if we have really good protocols. But if we have this good specification, then we can actually start building models that include or exclude based on the rules, right? So they understand what are, let's say, the included study designs. They can extract what is the study design of this particular abstract. They can compare and then suggest whether something should be included or not. For this to happen, we don't really need to have previous decisions. And we did something like this already. We published a poster together with Open Health. This is a company that does systematic reviews. It was presented at ISPOR in Barcelona in November. This approach is very promising. I mean, we can speed up the screening much more than with ranking. We can make it much more explainable, because for every abstract, we can say why the machine thinks it should be included or excluded. And we also get better accuracy this way. So I believe that this is really the kind of path that we will follow for the next couple of years.
Very interesting, because I have had this discussion. There is a conference that you may find interesting, Search Solutions. It's in London around the end of November every year, and I had this conversation with a few others, and each one of them have different approach to tackling this. But as a user that have been screening for 20 years, I think we should give up these two categories of yes, no, and focus on three categories of yes, no, cannot decide, and not confuse the machine with the part that they cannot decide, because there are abstracts that even humans can't decide about them. We don't expect the machine to be able to know the relevance. And then I also discussed that it all depends on having standard perfect bibliographic record. If you have records that are missing abstract, if there are records that are coming from clinicaltrials.gov and people export it as RIS, it will have only title. So these are the things that confuses the machine. And I've discussed it in length in my blog post, but I'm not going to dive into that, because this is all about learning from you and your experience. So I'm going to move to the GRADEpro, and please tell the audience what is that GRADEpro offers? Is it just summary of finding tables?
So it started with summary of findings tables, and this was really the only functionality in the previous version of the tool. But since we moved this to the web, and with all the great possibilities of collaboration, we added a lot of functionality around kind of optimizing the work of the panel, starting with collecting conflicts of interest from the panel, then scoping the review, so asking the panel what are their ideas on what questions we should address, what outcomes we should address for some, let's say, populations and interventions. And then after the review is done, so after we kind of hopefully go through laser to get the results, we of course have the summary of findings tables, but also now for network meta-analysis. So this is a recent addition, and I think something that will become more and more important over the time. And what is also important is for these evidence tables, it's not only about creating like a standardized output, a PDF or a Word file, but we also have these interactive versions. So for instance, for the network meta-analysis, you can reorder the interventions or outcomes, or you can create league tables or graphs, or you can limit the number of interventions that you consider to some subsets, or choose a common comparator. So you can, kind of slice and dice the data from the trials to facilitate the discussion with the panel. And I believe that this is also very important, that this kind of visualization part of what it does. And then we have something we call panel voice, which is a module for Delphi-like discussion with your panel. So it's based and kind of connected very deeply into GRADE's evidence to decision framework. even if it can also support different frameworks of this type. So for instance, we have a framework called WHO Integrate that was done by WHO. And the idea here is that in these frameworks, for the audience that may not come from, let's say, the guideline background, you're going through a number of criteria to arrive at your final recommendation. So these criteria can include, for instance, whether something is a problem, what is the balance of benefits and harms, and so on and so on. What is the acceptability, the cost effectiveness of different options.
Is
We
it the
have
evidence to decision framework that you are referring to?
yeah, exactly. And we have this also in the multi-intervention flavor, right? So you can also do this based on results of network meta-analysis. And you can engage the panel to actually vote on all these small decisions that lead you to the final decision, or whether to recommend A or B. And along the way, you can kind of create multiple rounds of this voting. So you can have people look at the evidence. They can send you comments that, for instance, something is missing from the evidence-based base. Then you can send it again, and depending on how a different, a given group work, it can be like a consensus-based approach where you are waiting for the ratings to kind of converge to something, or you can use different methods of kind of managing the dispute. But in the end, it enables people to conduct guideline panels fully remotely, which of course was hugely beneficial, especially during the pandemic, right? So during the pandemic in 2020, we actually had many guidelines that were developed fully online. And even if we are back to traveling, people also recognize the carbon footprint, the inefficiencies associated with organizing too many meetings. I mean, meetings are great, and nothing will probably work better. But with tools like this, you can also potentially reduce the meetings that you don't need, or shorten the meetings that you need to have. And then after you have your recommendation, so after panel voice is finished, we have tools for publishing or disseminating the results through different channels. So one example here is you have like an editor to write your guideline and include the results of these previous steps, so like interactive tables. Based on this, we, for instance, created something called RAG-Chat, which is RAG-enabled. Again, before it was called RAG, assistant that actually allows you to search through published recommendations. And what I believe is pretty unique about RAG-Chat is that this is not really the typical retrieval-augmented generation, that you are just looking for something that sounds like your question and then generating the results. We have a database, right? Because in GRADEpro, you are not just creating text, you are creating a lot of metadata, whether this is like a positive recommendation, what is the setting, what is the country, then this RAG-Chat is actually generating a query into this database for you. So if you say, give me recommendations from the UK on something, then it will, the large language model will first read your query, find out that it should kind of apply filter for location and set this to the UK. And then it knows that it should apply filter for the intervention and set it to this particular value. So then you get very precise results that are linked to the actual records in the database. So I believe that this is something really promising and something that is enabled by having GRADEpro as kind of a system that produces richly annotated data. I mean, you can do a chatbot assistant based on just plain text, right? But it will never work with such accuracy as having very precise metadata about all the recommendations, because then, we can actually do matching on different fields associated with these guidelines. So yeah, this is something that was really the first application of AI within GRADEpro, but we are now looking for much more. We submitted a grant application to apply AI in a way that will increase inclusivity and kind of accessibility of the platform. So something that is especially on our minds here is that to kind of engage patients more in this process, we need not only plain language summaries of the evidence and the recommendations, but we actually need to have something for them to understand the whole process and the methodology of doing the guidelines. And for this reason, we also want to create chatbots that will explain this to them, because of course the resources for the methodologies and so on are always scarce, right? So we hope that this technology will help to make this process more inclusive and more accessible.
Very exciting. I think I haven't seen many people involving or trying to involve public and patient representatives in the developments of guidelines. I mean, they are not deeply involved at least. They just want to tick box, so they ask one or two members to just join the team to say that, yeah, we involved two people. It's very exciting times that we are living in, not because of the fast pace of the technology. I mean, if there was a way to just slow it down a bit so people could catch up. I also wanted to ask you about grade decision aids. Is it part of Evidence Prime or is it something separate?
So GRADEpro now already enables you to kind of generate these decision aids at the end of the process. So you can, based on your recommendation, you can create something that can then be used for shared decision making. So explaining different terms in your recommendation to the patients, and then them going through the process of kind of marking their values and preferences, familiarizing themselves with the evidence, and then looking at the final recommendation. I believe that this is something that we have right now, but the future really holds much improved version of this that is also more interactive. I mean, by actually leveraging also generative AI. But already people can use this to generate the decision aids. But I believe that we can do much better than what we have right now.
Thank you. And well, this is the challenging question. We've got more than one systems for developing recommendations and developing the summary of finding tables. I'm just going to focus on two of them for now. GRADEpro GDT versus MAGICapp. I want to choose. Can you help me understand why we have these two? And do we need actually two? And what are the differences?
So, starting from the end, I believe that we need to, because, the going back again to what happens in the AI field, right? How, this, I agree with you that pace of progress is pretty impossible to stay updated with. But at the same time, we get this progress because we have multiple competitors right now in the market, right? And we have this model from OpenAI o1 that just got released, and then we have this lab DeepSeek releasing their model at only 3% of price of o1, but have matching them in quality, and this creates really innovation, and now nobody can really stand still. And I believe, of course, on maybe smaller scale, but this was also true for MAGICapp and GRADEpro, that the existence of both tools was always something that kept us working hard, right? So, and this is something that I hear from many of the organizations, that they actually appreciate having two tools, and I know of some of the groups that use both. I mean that they, for instance, use GRADEpro for the development of Guideline, and then MAGICapp for publishing, for putting this online. And from the very beginning, I believe that these were our kind of relative strengths, that MAGICapp was much better at publishing. We were better at, let's say, the process of actually doing the guideline. Now, over the years, of course, these differences are smaller because MAGICapp added a lot of functionality for guideline development. We also worked a lot on publishing. So of course, this is kind of going into some similar direction. But still, we are both innovating and have new ideas. So even if I believe now on the basic level, the choice may be much more difficult because you have two very mature and feature complete tools. There is a lot of new stuff going on that makes it, let's say, even more interesting, really, to make your choice. So I believe that also one way of looking at this is that we, as Evidence Prime, we are actually a software company, right? So we also are able to kind of meet many requirements and demands associated with integrating with some in-house tools. We put a lot of effort into security and compliance. So, for instance, we can work with the government sector in many places because we have all the required certificates. So this is also very often a deciding factor, that people just need kind of to have more kind of software engineering muscle from the team to make this happen. Yeah, but I believe that this is a question where I of course have a conflict of interest and I'm biased. I try to make it as objective as possible, and I personally appreciate the team behind MAGICapp a lot. And as I say, I believe that this is really for the better, that there are two tools, and we are kind of competing in a good way.
Well, I asked this question to make Per from MAGICapp to accept my invitation for the interview. So they are going to have chance to talk about MAGICapp. So we are not going to be one-sided on this. But thank you very much for your honest comment and welcoming this, let's say, multipolar environment in development that each one of us could learn from each other. So how close are we for having living clinical practice guidelines? I mean, if we've done the search and the machine has learned from it, and the screening and machine has learned, and data extraction and machine has learned, and grading, machine has learned all of that, shouldn't we be able to automate the updates because the machine has already learned from it? And the updates are usually tiny. They are not big. There's one study, two study coming, let's say, every month. How far?
I believe that the evidence synthesis part is much easier to automate. And again, maybe this is a little bit it is a simplification, of course, but my take again is that reviews can be fully automated once they are systematic. So here I truly believe that we can achieve this soon, if only we have good protocols, if only we can tell exactly what we want in these reviews. But the part that happens in the guideline space, so the decisions by the panel are of course something that I would not like to automate, because this is if something is actually affecting human beings, I don't think that the machine should just decide on itself. I believe that this requires a living panel. And in the paper from Eliakl and colleagues that introduced this concept of living recommendations, they had like 7 items. Many of them you already mentioned. And the 2 last ones were living panel and living budget. And this is a huge shift in terms of the paradigm, because nowadays when you do a guideline, it's like guideline from 2025, and you do this over 1 or 2 years. You finish in 2025, you publish, the group disbands, and nobody is working on this anymore, because another update will be like a separate project with a separate lead, with new panel and new budget, right? And to really make living guidelines, you need to have some structure in place that will continuously support this effort. And you also need to have guideline panel a little bit like on call, right? Because it may happen that every month we'll need to have a guideline panel meeting, voting. Of course, doing this remotely is, I believe, the only way. But still, you need to have people with their conflict of interest updated, who are willing to engage at any point in time and really issue a new recommendation. So these are problems that cannot be solved only with technology. I mean, we can make it more efficient and cheaper to do this, but actually you need to have a change in terms of how we organize and fund guidelines. For some organizations, this is possible. Like for the WHO, for instance, of course, they have many processes also outside of guidelines. So we worked with the list of essential medicines. So of course, they have like a 2-year update cycle, and they basically have technical officers that work on this list all the time. For large professional associations, this is also possible. But for smaller guidelines, this is, as I said, I mean, this is simply a new update ends, and then you kind of need to start from scratch.
Thank you for clarifying that the evidence synthesis part can be automated, but it is the process that involves human being and the experts that cannot be, and the budgeting and planning. Very interesting. One word, GRADEgpt.
So yeah, GPT is a project that is really from a grassroots project from Grade Working Group, initiated by Ignacio Neumann. And this is very close to what we are also as a group thinking, and also collaborating with Ignacio on making grade more accessible. So, there are voices that grades became too complicated, and that we have too much guidance and too much of these papers, and that it's difficult to apply. GRADEgpt is basically a custom GPT built kind of inside ChatGPT that was trained to answer questions about grade. Now there is a new edition of GRADEbook. So it used to be called Grade Handbook, and available, for instance, inside GRADEpro. But now we have a new edition of, let's say, this manual on how to apply grade. A new platform that will have this AI kind of built in from day one. So the long-term idea here is that whenever you have problem with applying grade, this AI assistant can actually look at your data and look at published examples. So if the authors kind of agree to share their tables, their work, to be used as instructional material, it can look for case studies that match your example. And then hopefully it will help people apply grade correctly. So it's very much about this, making this more accessible, and broadening the audience for applying grade.
So when GradeGPT got released, there were voices coming that it is really dangerous and it is advocating the wrong function. So it made people think if there has been any user experience testing done on this before release. And I wanted to ask you about the user experience part of development of GradePro and Laser AI as well. Um, do you have any, let's say, process in place to make sure that the product released to the users is worthy of use and trustworthy?
Yeah, so with GradeGPT, I believe that this is still kind of in the, let's say, beta period. And I believe that Ignacy and the team will be testing this before, let's say, more widespread rollout and before we integrate this within GradePro. But what you mentioned is very important, and of course this user experience is a little bit like on the two levels. So we have the usability of the application itself, and this is something that our UX designers work on, and they do usability studies, and kind of results of these studies inform next iterations of designs and also our product planning. I mean, understanding what works, what doesn't work. But there is also the question of usability in terms of interaction with AI. So the safety, let's say, of the AI responses, which is a little bit a different thing because it's not something that you can necessarily, test with people. It's more about putting some safeguards to make sure that these systems are not, kind of, for instance, giving medical advice, right? So that would be a big problem with any application of this technology. Here, there are many methods of doing this. So, for instance, we collaborate with Microsoft and we do a lot of these deployments using kind of their tools, and they have tools for kind of monitoring what these models say, right? So you can actually filter the responses. In many cases, this is like another small model looking at the responses from the larger one, and for instance, trying to detect whether this sounds like medical advice. This, unfortunately, will never be the final, let's say, solution. I mean, it's always possible that something will simply get to the users through all the safety systems that we have. And, there are researchers and not so maybe researchers, but just hackers that try to break these models every time they are released. And we know that there is not such a thing as unbreakable deployment of this technology. I mean, these hackers were able to get every single model that got released to say things that they should not say. There are also, very exciting studies. I find them very exciting on how the models are able to actually scheme against people. I mean that if you have these agentic applications where you have models kind of acting as agents, that they can collude and they can collaborate by speaking to each other in some sort of a cipher that is that cannot be detected by humans. So there are many safety problems here, and of course the best minds all around the world are thinking about it. But at the same time, it's not like we can always also trust people. I mean, it's not like, if we have somebody in the call center and we tell them never give medical advice, it's not like they will always obey, right? We may have people that, depending all the training, will actually cross this line. I believe that the important thing is that these models don't have any understanding of the consequences, and also they don't have any liability. So this is really what makes it very different. If we catch models giving medical advice, even if they should not, then we can shut down the whole model and don't do this anymore, right? That's the only possible solution. While if we have something like this done by a human, we can, put some corrective action. We can train them more, and hopefully that they will actually correct their behavior. So yeah, I believe that that this is a very, I would say, big problem. We were never kind of faced with deploying this to the kind of patients yet. We were always doing applications of AI in, let's say, more closed settings. The RegChat technology that I told you about is actually also like a closed research demo. We are not releasing this to the patients yet, exactly for the reasons that I cited. I hope that we will solve this to a level that is, let's say, acceptable, and that we will be able to deploy this technology for a very simple reason. I mean, if we don't do this, as I believe, great working group, people that actually are aware of the consequences, somebody else will. I mean, it's much better if we do this, taking all the care and all the responsibility that we have as this group, rather than just leaving this unoccupied and waiting for, let's say, the people that are not really having this sort of concerns to fill this gap.
Yes, move fast, break things. You've heard of it. I
Yeah,
think it comes from the Mark Zuckerberg, I think.
yeah, it's
And
from
these are a clan of people who say that just make stuff, release them and see what happens. That's how social media came with all of its side effects. It's not like a drug that we have to test in 4 or 5 trials until we get the approval. With technology, you just release it and see what happens. That is what they did with ChatGPT. They could have added disclaimer on top of the ChatGPT's box to say that the medical advice given is not accurate. They are not entitled. If you use this medical advice, the consequence, you are gonna be the responsible person, not the ChatGPT. They could have added a safety control that if you upload a PDF that is copyrighted, it has copyright sign. It could have said, I cannot process it because this
Mm.
copyrighted. They didn't. So they are moving fast, breaking things, and that is how it works for them, but not for the healthcare. And you are completely right. Thank you for sharing all of this red teaming and the safety issues that is going on. I wanted to ask, should we expect any surprises from Evidence Prime in coming years, 2025, 2026?
I hope so. So, we actually pretty, it's a pretty fresh news, but in October, we started a new research project on automation of systematic reviews funded by European Union. So we now have very ambitious research plans. So I hope that, you will see results of this work pretty soon. Some are already happening, like our extraction from tables, for instance, that we added to the data extraction module. Some are coming with, for instance, interpretation of figures also, but not only, let's say, on kind of question and answer level, but also at actually trying to digitize all the data in the figures. So we have a lot of plans here. We also have plans for introducing more of AI into GRADEpro, and how, as I said, how guidelines are developed and also disseminated. So I think we have quite a lot of surprises planned, and please follow our developments. I hope that you will find them interesting.
Yes, thank you for sharing. It's all good news. It's all music to our ears. And there is one thing that many of the users are asking. Probably a third of the queries that comes toward me are related to this, and that is having free automation tools. Because simply many people are blocked by using, blocked by the technologies because they say that you have to pay. While I understand that the maintaining the safety, cybersecurity, um, cloud space, processing power, all of that requires payment. Um, do you have anything in place to help people who cannot afford payment? I mean, let's say I'm developing a guideline for a tiny society in the United States or in China. And then I want to use GRADEpro. Is it freely available? How about Laser AI? And for the future, do you think we should fund systematic reviews or we should fund the technology to produce these systematic reviews rather?
Yeah, so especially with GradePro, so there is like a free version of GradePro that will always be free. This is part of our commitment, and also the reason why we have one of the reasons why we have a co-founder, McMaster University, is that even if we close down as a company, they will continue. They will basically get all the source code to GradePro to be able to offer this for free, right? So the very idea of establishing a spin-off was to make sure that the tool can be developed, because with many academic projects, it's a little bit like, somebody moves to another institution or finishes her or his PhD, and then the project is dead, right? So the idea was to have a company that can fund itself and keep the project alive. But at the same time, we also have some safety measures in case we are out of business, that the tool will remain free. And of course, not all of the functionality in GradePro is free, because otherwise we couldn't fund it from the subscriptions. So there is some sort of advanced functionality, but in reality, this is something that is purchased by institutions that have budgets. And whenever a group from lower middle income country approaches us and they don't have a budget, we either offer discounts or offer this for free. And if they need this additional functionality. Typically, this additional functionality is something that is really required once you have a larger group, and this mainly means that there is already some budget. So I think in this way, we were able to make the tool available, and we have more than 130,000 registered users, and 95% of them are using the tool for free, maybe even more. With Laser, we are, for the reasons you cited, we currently don't have like a free version, simply because we think that if you don't need this level of AI support that we have, then you have many excellent options that are available for free or almost for free, right? So perhaps you should consider using this tool once you actually need this AI. I believe that there is also some misconception, and thank you for also mentioning, the costs associated with running this technology, because people say, okay, but ChatGPT is free, but the reality is that ChatGPT by default collects your data, and you can opt out, but this is really how they are collecting data to improve their models for offering this for free. And also we know that OpenAI is operating at loss. I mean, they are losing money on this, right? So it's very kind of difficult for a tool like ours to be compared to ChatGPT, which is basically operating at loss. So we'll see. The improvements to the models mean that now we'll have large language models or small language models available on our devices. So this is already true for some mobile devices, but of course also they will be coming to the Chrome browser. So everybody will really have a small language model as part of their browser, and applications that run in the browser will be able to just run on your device. So of course, this will kind of move the cost of, let's say, electricity and equipment from us to the users. And maybe at this point, it will be also possible to offer these tools for free. Yeah, I think that regardless, we have some programs to make this available for free for groups that do research, especially in automation, or we for instance, offered this for free to the groups that are doing reviews and guidelines related to refugees. So in many, let's say, cases where this is some not-for-profit activity where funding is really difficult, we of course have some special programs also to sponsor this research by providing subscriptions.
Thank you very much for your complete answer. I mean, you also answered part of my second question. Thank you. And you are a leader in tech, in automation tech and evidence synthesis. I mean, you will be humble to say that, no, I'm not leader and all of that, but please give the new generation, the younger generation, a few advice, a few lessons in case they want to enter the field of evidence synthesis, either as a methodological field or the technological field for the automation.
So for me, it's not a completely abstract question because I'm, for instance, looking at my daughter who is just starting her primary school next year, and of course, it's still a lot of time until she enters the job market, but already the changes that I see in technology and how this really changes our workplace, right? Means that the time horizon for is actually now that very probably the job market in 10 years may actually look different. Even if maybe not like we all lose our jobs and so on, but I think that some change is inevitable. So so I believe that the first and most important part here is of course the kind of the human part, right? So I believe that many of the technical skills will be automated at some point. And also, this is not necessarily something that brings the most value. I mean, if you can do something the quickest or but it's really worthwhile to really be kind of a good leader and build good atmosphere in the team and treat people well, simply speaking, while working under pressure and kind of having inspiring goals for the whole team, right? So I believe that this is really the part that is really missing from our education system. I mean, how to really inspire people, how to really be good to each other and not to compete with each other all the time. I mean, at least this is my experience growing up here in Poland. But at the same time, I believe more and more this will be important in the future workplace, wherever you work. And for evidence synthesis in general, I believe I will sound like a broken record, but for me it's a little bit like the difficult part is writing the protocols and designing the review, and really figuring out what you want to find and how you will deal with indirectness. This is the hard part. Not actually being the fastest in screening, because the machines will most likely replace manual screening, to be honest, at some point, right? But what is really important is this conceptual part. I mean, what is really the research question that we are trying to answer, and so on.
That's a very good advice. The thinking part, the part that is more humane than the other parts of the evidence synthesis. And if we want to repeat this interview in the next few years, in how many years we should repeat it? I mean, based on the technological development and the evidence prime changing and developing, in how many years?
So, based on the technology development, I guess in 0.3 years or something like this. But frankly speaking, I think that once we finish our research project, that this EU grant that I told you about, which is September, which is really in 2 years, because we just started, and it's a 3-year grant, but in 2 years we'll hopefully enter the pilot phase for the tool. I believe that this will be a very exciting checkpoint. I mean, what we were actually able to achieve out of our plans, and how the landscape changed in the meantime. That will be really, really interesting.
Great. So 2027 September.
Yeah.
Hopefully. And I usually ask this from all of the guests. If I want to interview other people, who should be my next guest? And you could introduce more than one person.
So I would reach out to the ICASR, so the International Collaboration on Automation of Systematic Review group, and I believe that everybody there. I mean, these are meetings with a lot of collaboration, and where everybody really participates very actively. So I believe that every single person that is active in this community would be a great guest. Of course, starting with the organizing committee. So I believe that many of these people personally. But I believe that these are really the thought leaders in terms of this automation in the world.
Absolutely. We have already interviewed Ethan Agai and James Thomas and Julian Elliott has agreed. So we are chasing a few others, and we already done the interview with Robert Ayan. So yeah, definitely we will continue this conversation, and I hope that we could update these conversations in the future as well, because I mean this field is like developing crazy. I mean, I couldn't catch up. I've got, I think, 800 PDFs to read. When? Never. I'm waiting for a new technology that is able to actually read it and summarize it with no hallucinations, so I could save a bit of time. If there is any other thing that you would like to discuss, either technological, methodological, philosophical, anything that is you think relevant, you could just say about it, yeah.
We really are very close on the technology level to achieving many of these goals, but we may not be ready with the methodology the way we actually believe we are. I mean, and this is something that we see a lot, for instance, in the risk of bias assessment, right? So people say, okay, so when will we automate risk of bias assessment? But then you actually look at RCTs included in multiple Cochrane reviews, and you look at risk of bias assessments from these different reviews, and you see that there are differences across the Cochrane reviews. So the problem for the same studies, right? So the problem is how we can automate something that different groups do differently. I mean, if our approach here really is that we will just help with pointing questions and highlighting text to help people answer the pointing questions, but of course the judgment will be still with them. So, but in reality, we should get more consistency in the risk of bias assessments, right? If this is meant to be helpful, it shouldn't be like this, that we have so much not only inter-rater but also inter-consensus disagreement. So I believe, in many cases, people are looking at technology like, okay, AI will come and fix all of our problems, but in many ways we can only fix what is fixable, right? And and some of the other problems need to be fixed on, let's say, the human level first.
Very interesting point, and I'm glad that you mentioned this inter-rater inconsistency and inter-consensus. So that is something that I don't think many people have considered before. But yes, the risk of bias tools require a level of subjective judgment that varies among the people based on their experience as well and their expertise in the field. So yeah, that is the challenging part of the work that we are doing anywhere that the human judgment is involved. That's why many people are looking into AI. They hope that AI judgment is going to replace human judgment, but it's not going to happen. Um, so Artur, you have been very generous with your time and knowledge, and on behalf of the evidence synthesis community, we would like to thank you sincerely and wish you and your team at Evidence Prime all the best. We hope to speak to you soon again. Thank you, Artur, and goodbye.
Thank you so much.